This morning you turned a handle and water came out. You drank it. You didn't smell it first. You didn't hold it up to the light. You didn't think about it once. For almost every year since humans built their first villages, that casual little act was one of the most dangerous things a person could do. And the way your ancestors survived it is far stranger than boiling a pot. Start with the trap your body is built into. You can go about 3 weeks without food. You can go about 3 days without water. Every human who has ever lived was forced over and over to put something into their mouth that they had no way to verify was safe. And water is never just water. Every animal that lives near a river also drinks from it, bathes in it, dies in it, and empties its bowels into it. Scientists have a blunt name for the route that follows: fecal-oral transmission. Waste from one gut travels through water and arrives in another gut, and the cycle starts again. The consequences are worse than most people picture. Take cholera, caused by a comma-shaped bacterium called Vibrio cholera. Swallow enough of them, and they survive the acid bath of your stomach and settle into your small intestine. There they release a toxin. That toxin locks onto the cells lining your gut and jams a molecular switch into the on position. The cells begin pumping chloride ions out into the intestine, and water follows the salt out of your body by simple osmosis, the same way a salted cucumber weeps. Your body isn't being poisoned in the usual sense. It is being drained. In severe cases, a person can lose up to a liter of fluid an hour, more than 20 liters in a day, roughly half of all the water an adult body contains. Death can arrive in under 12 hours. And the person is not sick from the water they drank. They are dying of thirst. So how did anyone make it to the next generation? The honest first answer is that plenty of them didn't. For most of human history, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of children died before their 5th birthday, and dirty water took a large share of them. Survival was not a technique, it was a filter. The second answer is that your ancestors were reading the water, and reading it well. Springs were prized because water emerging from rock has already been filtered by it. A fast stream beat a still pond. You drank upstream of a herd and never downstream, and you walked away from anything cloudy, filmed over, or smelling of rot. Every one of those habits is genuinely useful, and not one of them requires knowing that bacteria exist. But they share a fatal blind spot. Giardia cysts are invisible. Cholera has no taste. A crystal-clear mountain stream with a dead deer half a kilometer upstream will look, smell, and taste perfect. Your senses evolved to detect rot, not microbes, which makes clear water the most confident-looking lie in nature. Then there is fire. Heat above roughly 70 degrees Celsius wrecks the proteins holding a bacterium together, and boiling is still the most reliable disinfection method humans have ever had. But boiling carries a hidden cost, and it is a big one. To boil water, you need a container that can sit in a fire without burning or melting. That is not a small ask. The oldest known pottery comes from Xianrendong Cave in southern China, dated by the archaeologist Wu Xiaohong and her colleagues in 2012 to around 20,000 years ago. 20,000 years sounds ancient until you line it up against the 300,000 years that anatomically modern humans have existed. For roughly 93% of the time your species has been on this planet, nobody owned a pot. There was a workaround, and archaeologists have found it all over the world. You dig a pit, line it with hide or bark, fill it with water, then drop in stones that have been sitting in a fire until they glow. The stones hiss, the water heats, and you get hot liquid with no fireproof vessel at all. It works. It also burns an enormous amount of firewood and effort for a few liters. Gathering fuel to boil every mouthful your family drinks every single day was simply not affordable. So boiling wasn't the everyday answer either, which brings you to the strangest solution of all, and to a piece of your own biology that had been waiting for it for 10 million years. In 2015, the biologist Matthew Carrigan and his colleagues reconstructed an ancient version of an enzyme called ADH4, which breaks down alcohol in the body. They found that around 10 million years ago, in a common ancestor of humans, chimpanzees, and gorillas, a single mutation made that enzyme roughly 40 times better at processing ethanol. The likely reason is fallen fruit. Fruit on the forest floor ferments, and an ape that could eat it without getting sick had access to food its rivals had to walk past. Your body was quietly issued a license for fermented liquid long before your species existed. And eventually, your species cashed it in, because the answer to dangerous water was to let your drinks rot on purpose. Fermented drinks show up almost everywhere humans settled down.
The biomolecular archaeologist Patrick McGovern analyzed pottery fragments from Jiahu in China and found the chemical fingerprints of a drink made from rice, honey, and fruit, dating to around 7,000 years before the Common Era. 9,000 years ago, somebody was already brewing. After that, it turns up everywhere. Beer in Mesopotamia, wine in the Caucasus, fermented milk across the steppe, honey water in Africa and Northern Europe. A rotting drink being safer than a fresh one sounds backwards. It isn't, because fermentation is not one defense, it is three, stacked. The first is heat. Grain brews start by mashing in hot water to release the sugars, and that heat alone kills a large share of whatever was already in the liquid. The second is what the yeast does to the container. Yeast arrives on fruit skins and out of the air, eats the sugar and gives off ethanol and carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide forms a blanket across the surface and pushes the oxygen out, which shuts the door on a whole class of spoilage organisms. Meanwhile, the sugar itself is disappearing. Any pathogen arriving late finds an airless container with nothing left to eat. The third layer is the one doing the real work. Lactic acid bacteria join in and drive the acidity down, often below a pH of 4. Vibrio cholera hates acid. So does salmonella. So do most of the organisms behind dysentery. Between the sourness, the missing oxygen, and the missing sugar, the drink simply stops being a habitat. That isn't magic. It's a hostile environment, engineered by accident, thousands of years before anyone knew a microbe existed. Now for the twist, and it's worth being honest about it. You have probably heard that people in the ancient and medieval world drank beer because water was poison. Historians have pushed back hard on that story, and they are right to. Medieval records are full of people drinking water quite normally, and fermented drinks were expensive. They cost grain and time, and they were valued for calories, taste, and social ritual as much as for safety. So treat the strong version of that claim as debated. What is not debated is the chemistry. A sour, low-alcohol brew is a far more hostile place for a pathogen than a bucket from the town ditch. Which leaves the question hiding underneath all of this. Why did dirty water become such a catastrophic problem in the first place? For most of human history, it wasn't one. A band of 30 people moving across a landscape leaves its waste behind and walks away from it. A disease like cholera needs a dense, connected population to keep the chain going. And in a small, mobile group, the chain breaks. The outbreak burns out with nobody left to infect. Then humans settled down. Villages became towns, towns became cities, and thousands of people were suddenly drinking from the same river they were emptying into. The waste of one household reached the cup of another within hours. Civilization did not inherit the water problem. Civilization manufactured it. Which is why this story doesn't really begin 300,000 years ago. It begins the day we stopped moving. It took until 1854 for anyone to prove it. A London physician named John Snow was watching a cholera outbreak tear through Soho, killing more than 500 people in 10 days inside an area you could walk across in a few minutes. Everyone else blamed bad air. Snow drew a map instead, marked every death on it, and watched the deaths cluster around one thing: a public water pump on Broad Street. He persuaded the parish to remove the pump handle. The outbreak was already fading by then, and Snow said so himself, but he had a map, and the map was the real weapon. He couldn't see the organism and had no germ theory to lean on, and he found it anyway. The mechanism followed.
Louis Pasteur showed through the 1860s that fermentation and spoilage were both driven by living microorganisms rather than spontaneous chemistry. And in 1884, Robert Koch isolated the cholera bacterium itself. Then, in 1908, Jersey City in New Jersey became one of the first cities to routinely chlorinate its public water supply. Chlorine is brutally simple. It tears apart the membranes and proteins of microorganisms, and it keeps working all the way through the pipes to your kitchen. So the pipe under your sink is the end of a chain that runs from a hot stone dropped into a hide-lined pit through 9,000 years of sour beer to a hand-drawn map of a London street. And the old trick never actually left. It just moved into your fridge. Yogurt, sourdough, pickles, kimchi, cheese, soy sauce, kombucha, every one of them works exactly the way your ancestors' drinks did. Sour the environment, strip out the oxygen and the sugar, and let the harmless microorganisms fill the space so the dangerous ones can't. The war isn't finished either. The World Health Organization estimates that around 2 billion people still lack safely managed drinking water at home, roughly 1 in 4 people alive. For them, the question this video started with isn't a history question at all. Tomorrow morning, you will turn that handle again. You'll drink without smelling it, without holding it up to the light, without a single thought. And that thoughtlessness is the finish line of the longest quiet war your species ever fought, crossed before you were born. The strangest thing about clean water isn't how hard it was to get. It's that it now tastes like nothing at all.